blood dripped from the forest floor before the Romans even realized they were under attack. Shadows moved between trees, arrows rained from the mist, and war cries shattered the silence. Rome, the empire that had conquered kingdoms and burned cities, believed discipline and formation could dominate any foe. But the Celts were different. They were wild, unbound, and fearless, fighting for tribe, honor, and survival. Every victory Rome claimed felt temporary, every march uncertain. This is Ancient Paths of Men, and this is the story of why Rome could never fully control the Celtic tribes. Rome didn't become the ruler of the ancient world through luck or bravery alone. It became unstoppable because it mastered control. The Roman Empire expanded like a machine built for conquest, crushing enemies not only with steel, but with structure. After victory, Rome didn't simply leave ruins behind. It built roads to move armies faster, erected forts to keep populations under watch, and planted Roman law into foreign soil like a permanent brand. Conquered lands were reorganized into provinces, taxed, and forced into obedience. Rome's discipline was its greatest weapon, because every battle was only the beginning. The real goal was occupation. To Rome, war wasn't chaos. It was procedure. But the further Rome marched into the north, the more it realized something disturbing. There was no single enemy to conquer. The Celts were not one nation standing under one banner. They were dozens, hundreds of tribes scattered across Gaul, Britannia, Iberia, and deep into Central Europe. Some lived in fortified hill settlements, others spread across open countryside, but all of them shared a cultural thread, similar languages, shared artistic traditions, and a warrior spirit that felt alien to Roman order. To Rome, this wasn't like invading a kingdom. It was like stepping into a storm made of separate fires. And that was the nightmare. Rome could crush one tribe, burn one settlement, execute one chieftain, and still the war would not end. Because another tribe would rise beyond the next forest. Another warband would form over the next hill. The Celts weren't united politically, but they were united by something far harder to destroy: identity, tradition, and loyalty to land. Rome wasn't fighting an empire. It was fighting a culture spread across an entire world of tribes. That lack of unity wasn't a weakness the way Rome expected. It was armor. Rome was built to fight kingdoms, to hunt down kings, to seize capitals and force surrender through political collapse. That was how Rome ended wars quickly. Remove the head, and the body dies. But the Celtic world had no single head, no emperor, no palace, no senate, no central city that could be captured to end everything. Every tribe was its own force, its own leadership, its own warriors, its own pride. Rome could win a battle and still feel like it had achieved nothing, because there was no final victory to claim. And even worse for Rome, Celtic leadership wasn't a permanent structure. It was survival-based. Kill a chieftain and another warrior could rise within days. Destroy a warband and the survivors could scatter, regroup, and return stronger. Rome could burn villages, hang leaders, and parade captives through the streets. Yet resistance still lived, because Celtic power wasn't centralized in a throne. It was decentralized in the people. Every clan carried the fire of rebellion, and every defeat only spread that fire into the forests and mountains where Rome's legions couldn't easily reach. This is why Rome couldn't control them the way it controlled others. With a kingdom, Rome could conquer the leadership and rule the rest through fear. But with the Celts, Rome was forced into endless war, because every victory created only temporary silence. It wasn't one enemy Rome was facing. It was a land full of enemies. A civilization made of tribes, each one capable of reigniting the fight. Rome didn't just have to defeat the Celts once. It had to defeat them over and over again, forever. And that kind of conquest was not conquest at all. It was a bleeding occupation. And this is where the real danger begins, because Rome wasn't just fighting scattered tribes. Rome was fighting a warrior culture that was built for resistance. Among many Celtic peoples, a man's worth wasn't measured by how much land he owned or how well he obeyed authority. It was measured by courage, by reputation, by how he stood when death was close enough to breathe on his neck. Battle was not simply a duty, it was identity. A Celtic warrior didn't fight because he was ordered to. He fought because honor demanded it, because his name meant something, and because to submit to Rome would be to live as a shadow of himself. Rome's intimidation tactics, which worked against so many other peoples, often failed here. Rome could burn villages, crucify rebels, and march prisoners through the streets, expecting fear to poison the will to fight. But Celtic pride was not easily broken. For many of these men, death was not the worst outcome. Dishonor was. They could retreat into forests, regroup in hills, and return with vengeance burning in their eyes. And that made them terrifying, because Rome wasn't facing soldiers who fought for pay or political reward. Rome was facing men who fought as if their very masculinity depended on defiance. Even the way the Celts fought carried a message. Their battle cries, their fearless charges, their willingness to throw themselves into the storm of Roman steel. It wasn't random madness. It was psychological warfare. It was a declaration that they did not fear Rome's order, Rome's discipline, or Rome's empire. They wanted Rome to feel the truth, that there are men who cannot be tamed, because they would rather fall screaming in the dirt than kneel quietly in chains. And as terrifying as Celtic courage was, the land itself made them even more dangerous. Rome's legions were designed for open ground, flat fields where formations could lock into place like iron walls, where discipline and coordination could grind an enemy into dust. But Celtic territory was not built for Roman warfare. It was dense forest, steep hills, winding rivers, cold marshlands, and endless mud. Every tree became cover. Every hill became a trap. Every foggy morning became an ambush waiting to happen. In this terrain, Rome's perfect formations broke apart, and once the formation broke, the Roman soldier was no longer part of a machine. He was just a man surrounded by hostile land. The Celts didn't just live in these lands, they mastered them. They knew every path, every river crossing, every hill where a warband could disappear and reappear. They could strike from the treeline, vanish into the mist, and leave Rome bleeding without ever offering a clean battle. The Romans, used to fighting in controlled conditions, were forced into constant paranoia. Every march felt like walking into a mouth that could close at any moment. The forests didn't belong to Rome. The hills didn't belong to Rome. Even the silence didn't belong to Rome. And the deeper Rome pushed into this wilderness, the worse it became. Camps had to be built stronger. Patrols had to be doubled. Roads had to be carved through hostile ground just to keep armies moving. But every road Rome built was also a line that could be attacked. Every bridge was a weak point. Every narrow pass was a death corridor. Geography turned Rome's conquest into exhaustion, forcing the empire to spend more men, more time, and more resources than it ever expected, just to hold ground that refused to stay quiet. And that exhaustion was not accidental. The Celts understood something Rome hated to admit. You don't defeat a giant by punching its armor. You bleed it slowly. They didn't always meet the legions in open battle, because that was exactly what Rome wanted. Rome thrived in straight lines, clear fronts, and predictable warfare. So the Celts made war unpredictable. They struck at night, hit small detachments, wiped out scouts, and vanished before the main force could respond. A Roman soldier could go days without seeing the enemy, and then suddenly watch his comrades dragged into the trees, screaming. Instead of trying to destroy Rome in one grand clash, Celtic tribes focused on wearing Rome down. They attacked supply wagons, slaughtered messengers, and raided camps along the edges of Roman territory. They forced Rome into a constant defensive posture, where even victory felt like weakness. The legions were trained for battlefields, but now they were forced to guard roads, protect food, escort convoys, and secure forests that could never truly be secured. The Celts turned Rome's war into an endless chase, one where the hunter was always tired, and the prey always controlled the terrain. And that constant pressure shattered Roman confidence. Rome could win a battle and still lose control the moment it marched away. The Celts didn't need to hold cities to win. They only needed to keep Rome unstable. Every ambush was a reminder that Rome's power had limits. Every raid was proof that the empire could be hurt. And over time, Rome began to realize the truth. In Celtic lands, the war never truly ended. It simply changed shape, waiting in the trees for the next opportunity to strike. And this is where Rome began to bleed in a way it wasn't used to bleeding, not in glorious battlefield clashes, but in slow, humiliating attrition. Rome's legions were terrifying in combat, but they were chained to something invisible: logistics. An army that size couldn't survive on bravery alone. It needed food wagons, pack animals, engineers, messengers, weapon shipments, and constant reinforcements. Every Roman advance into Celtic territory stretched those supply lines thinner and thinner, turning the march north into a gamble. The Celts didn't have to destroy the legions. They only had to starve them, isolate them, and force them to fight hungry, tired, and surrounded. The deeper Rome pushed into the wilderness, the more vulnerable it became. Roads had to be built just to move supplies. Camps had to be fortified every night. Scouts had to sweep the forests constantly. And still it wasn't enough. Celtic raiders struck convoys, burned bridges, and slaughtered isolated patrols. A single ambush could wipe out days of food and leave an entire legion trapped in hostile land. In Roman warfare, momentum was everything. But in Celtic lands, momentum turned into overextension, and overextension turned into exhaustion. And that exhaustion had consequences beyond the battlefield. Every lost convoy meant slower advances, weaker morale, and rising fear. Roman soldiers began to understand that the enemy wasn't only in front of them, it was everywhere. Hunger, cold, mud, and constant ambushes turned the campaign into psychological torture. Rome could win battles and still lose men daily to raids, sickness, and fatigue. The Celtic tribes forced Rome into the worst kind of war, one where you don't lose in a single moment, but in 1,000 small cuts. And yet, the most terrifying thing for Rome wasn't the raids, the hunger, or the endless ambushes. It was the thought of what would happen if these tribes ever stopped fighting separately. Most of the time, Celtic divisions actually help Rome, because Rome could isolate one tribe, crush it, then move on to the next. But on rare occasions, the Celts did something Rome feared more than any wild charge from a forest. They united. And when they united, the Roman war machine didn't look invincible anymore. It looked vulnerable. One of the most dangerous moments came in Gaul, when Vercingetorix rose and rallied tribes into a coordinated rebellion against Rome. For once, Rome wasn't facing scattered warbands. It was facing a unified resistance with strategy, leadership, and purpose. Celtic forces burned their own settlements to deny Rome supplies, attacked Roman movements, and forced Caesar's legions into brutal confrontations. Rome still won in the end, but the cost was heavy, and the message was clear. If the Celts could hold unity long enough, Rome could be pushed to the edge. And even after Rome claimed victory, it never truly felt like peace. The Celtic unity might have collapsed, but the idea of it haunted Rome, because Rome understood something deeply unsettling. The Celts weren't incapable of organization. They were simply difficult to bind. But if the right leader emerged, if the tribes found common purpose, the Roman Empire could face a rebellion powerful enough to shake its grip on the north. That possibility alone forced Rome into constant pressure, constant occupation, and constant fear of the next great uprising. Even when Rome succeeded in crossing the Channel and establishing a foothold in Britannia, it quickly learned that victory, on paper, did not mean control on the ground. The southern lands could be mapped, towns garrisoned, and taxes collected. But the deeper you went, the more unstable everything became. Roman forts could hold out for a time, but Celtic resistance never truly disappeared. It simmered in the forests, marshes, and hills, waiting for the right moment to ignite. The most legendary of these uprisings came under Boudicca, queen of the Iceni, who united neighboring tribes in a furious revolt that burned Roman towns and slaughtered legions. Her rebellion was not just a military threat, it was a cultural one, proving that occupation did not equal submission. In Britannia, Rome realized that controlling a people required more than walls, roads, and legions. It required breaking spirit, and the Celts time and again refused to be broken. Beyond the borders of Roman Britannia, there were lands that the empire never fully tamed. Ireland remained untouched, and much of Scotland's rugged highlands resisted every attempt at occupation. For Rome, these unconquered territories were more than empty space. they were proof of limitation. Even the greatest empire could not impose its will on lands that were inhospitable, fiercely defended, and culturally unyielding. These regions became safe havens for Celtic tribes, where their traditions, language, and identity remained untouched by Roman law or legions. The existence of unconquered lands revealed that empire has limits, and that freedom can survive even in the shadow of unstoppable power. Religion added another layer of resistance that Rome could never fully control. Among the Celts, spiritual leaders, druids, were not merely priests. They were lawgivers, educators, and keepers of tribal memory. They connected people to their land, their ancestors, and their warrior traditions. The Druids could inspire loyalty, organize gatherings, and preserve knowledge that no Roman sword could erase. Rome understood the threat: conquer the warriors, and the culture may survive; suppress the Druids, and the spirit might bend. But even then, belief could not be fully extinguished. Celtic identity was intertwined with religion, and these sacred figures ensured that, even under occupation, the memory, customs, and pride of the tribes endured. Faced with relentless resistance, Rome realized that brute force alone could never secure Celtic lands. The empire adapted, turning to diplomacy, manipulation, and cunning strategy. Tribal rivalries were exploited, leaders bribed or promised wealth, and alliances formed with cooperative clans who would act as Roman intermediaries. Some Celtic elites were absorbed into Roman society, offered status, land, or citizenship in exchange for loyalty. Rome divided and ruled, turning potential enemies against each other while gradually imposing control without fighting every battle. Even then, the empire never fully erased Celtic identity. It softened resistance rather than extinguished it, proving that Rome's genius lay not only in the sword, but in the art of political domination. Faced with relentless resistance, Rome realized that brute force alone could never secure Celtic lands. The empire adapted, turning to diplomacy, manipulation, and cunning strategy. Tribal rivalries were exploited, leaders bribed or promised wealth, and alliances formed with cooperative clans who would act as Roman intermediaries. Some Celtic elites were absorbed into Roman society, offered status, land, or citizenship in exchange for loyalty. Rome divided and ruled, turning potential enemies against each other while gradually imposing control without fighting every battle. Even then, the empire never fully erased Celtic identity. It softened resistance rather than extinguished it, proving that Rome's genius lay not only in the sword, but in the art of political domination. Even after centuries of war, occupation, and diplomacy, Rome never truly conquered the Celtic tribes. Their lands could be mapped, their villages burned, their chieftains executed, but the spirit of the Celts remained untamed. Their warrior culture, bound to honor, loyalty, and courage, refused to bend. Their knowledge of a land gave them an advantage no legion could fully overcome, and their decentralized society meant there was no single blow that could end resistance. Religion, tradition, and identity acted as shields as strong as any sword. Even where Rome left roads, walls, and forts, Celtic culture endured beneath the surface, a quiet defiance that outlasted empires. The story of the Celts teaches a lesson for modern men. True strength is not only in conquest, but in resilience, adaptation, and the courage to defend your principles and identity against overwhelming odds. It is in refusing to surrender your spirit, no matter how powerful the opposition. The Celts remind us that freedom, honor, and identity are as vital today as they were in the forests and hills of ancient Europe. This is Ancient Paths of Men, where the lessons of history forge the warriors of tomorrow.